My name is Oliver Stubbs. My whole life and identity are inextricably intertwined with my camera. And to say that I make a living behind the lens would be a monumental understatement. Ever since I was a child, I've been fascinated by the power of photography, the ability to freeze time to immortalize a moment. At an early age, I discovered a knack for capturing more than just images, but stories, emotions, and life itself. Through looking back, my pictures weren't all too impressive as a child, but as I grew older, my fascination turned into a burning passion. I studied photography at the prestigious University of Arts London and became known by my peers for my evocable storytelling through images. I had the unique ability to capture the unseen, the unheard, the unspoken, the soul of a scene. My distinctive style was hailed as revolutionary. My work spans a range of genres, but my underwater photography has become particularly renowned within my small community. The unseen world beneath the waves, teeming with life, captivated me, and I devoted myself to capturing it in all its vibrancy and mystery. My photos' full, vivid detail and the uncanny ability to transport viewers below the surface into the heart of the underworld. And at age 30, I was awaiting the dreaded burnout my friends had all complained about. I was a natural choice when the renowned historical and marine research organization, the Seapass Society, decided to take on the ambitious task of finding and documenting Ravenser, Britain's own Atlantis. They needed someone who could document the submerged ruins in a way that showcased their historical significance and captured the mystique of a town long lost at sea. A challenge that I knew was perfect for me. Dr. Catherine Howard, the head of the Seapass Society and a well-respected marine historian, contacted me personally. She believed in my unique talent for visual storytelling and thought I could bring the sunken town's story to life. She felt my photos could inspire a global audience, stir their imagination, and allow them to connect with a past submerged beneath the cold waters of the North Sea. Naturally, I was thrilled and honored to be selected for such a significant project. The chance to dive into the mysterious depth and uncover the secrets of a lost town was a dream come true, and although I had done similar projects, something just felt different. My flat in London soon became a frenzy of activity, cluttered with new high-tech underwater cameras, powerful lights for illuminating the dark ocean depth, and all manner of equipment for preserving my gear against the corrosive effects of salt water, all funded by the Seapass Society. But amid the chaos, there was an undercurrent of palpable excitement. Beneath the exhilaration was the thin layer of anxiety, like a dusting of frost on an otherwise warm window pane. It lingered there, never once stepping into the light, but ominously hovering in the room's dark corners. The task ahead was daunting. This was not a recreational dive into a well-explored reef, but an expedition into a town lost to the depths 6 centuries ago. Unease did not overshadow my enthusiasm. It fueled it. The chance to tell the story of Ravenser, to breathe life into its submerged and silent streets, was a thrill like no other. I relished the challenge. Before long, it was time to travel to Yorkshire. I was introduced to my dive buddy, a man named Callum, a burly Scotsman with a twinkle in his eye and a jovial demeanor. But beneath his light-hearted exterior was an individual of impressive expertise and meticulous attention to detail. Dr. Howard had assembled a unique team of historians, marine archaeologists, and technical experts. Most of them were to stay above sea and watch through another camera broadcasting the boat. Callum was the Seapass Society's health and safety coordinator, a veteran diver with an impeccable track record. His task was to ensure the safety of the divers as they explored the undersea ruins, and I was to be his primary responsibility. Callum was hired not just for his expertise in dive safety, but also for his ability to remain calm in a crisis. His warm personality put me at ease, making me feel safer about the dive. In the days leading up to the dive, Callum and I worked closely together. We conducted practice dives, tested our equipment, and developed a dive plan. His attention to detail and uncompromising approach to safety impressed me. He was careful and cautious, but also open to the spirit of adventure that this exploration held. The excitement and nerves within me swirled like a tempest. The idea I was soon to explore a piece of history untouched for centuries, about to uncover stories that had been silenced by the sea, kept me tossing and turning in my bed at night. The day finally arrived. Our vessel was a massive, state-of-the-art boat stocked with all the equipment necessary for the dive, including cutting-edge sonar systems, robotic submersibles, and a plethora of diving gear. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, a static charge that pricked the skin and raised the hair on the back of your neck. I noticed hushed conversations among the crew, quick, sidelong glances that hinted at concern. Was it the enormity of the task that caused this? Or perhaps they were wary of a new face. I shook it off. I had a talent for overthinking things, especially when stressed. Callum meticulously checked my gear, ensuring every piece was functioning correctly. His diligent inspection was comforting, a touch of solidity amid a sea of anticipation. We ran through our final checklist: emergency signals, the navigation route, and ascend and descend points. When we finished our preparations, the moment we'd been waiting for was finally upon us. With one last nod of reassurance from Callum, we plunged into the icy embrace of the North Sea. The sudden chill was a shock, biting through the thick neoprene of my diving suit, but it did nothing to dampen my spirits. If anything, it heightened my senses, focusing my mind on the world we were about to enter. As we descended, the remnants of Ravenser Odd slowly emerged from the gloom. The water had eroded much, but what remained bore a spectral reminder of the bustling town it once was. Buildings, streets, and outlines of what may have been a town square, all blanketed in a shroud of decay and encrusted with marine life. Intricate stonework, long worn away by the constant current, was now home to vibrant corals and anemones, creating an eerie fusion of man-made and natural beauties. The coral had claimed these structures, using them as foundations for their colonies, transforming them into organic, living artworks that swayed gently in the ocean's rhythm. It was a haunting sight, a tableau of life abruptly halted and preserved beneath the waves. Statues stood guard over the underwater realm, their features softened by centuries under the sea, their stony gaze meeting mine through a veil of tiny bubbles that streamed from my regulator. A fish darted past, a flash of iridescent color that stood out against the gray stone and green-blue water. I was caught between two worlds, the ancient human past and the teeming marine life of the present. It was simultaneously humbling and thrilling, a testament to nature's uncanny ability to reclaim and repurpose. With my camera at the ready, I eagerly started documenting this hauntingly beautiful underwater world. Callum and I navigated through the labyrinth of sunken streets. Each building was a monument to the past, offering a unique glimpse into the lives of those who once called Ravenser Odd home. While I concentrated on capturing the visual essence of these ancient structures, other team members avoided us and engaged in their own tasks. They meticulously scraped away at the encrusted stone walls, collecting samples to further understand how the sea had affected the material over the centuries. Though this underwater world was extraordinary, it wasn't entirely alien. I'd spent years exploring and documenting similar sites, yet each had its own unique character, a singular atmosphere that made every dive a new adventure. My previous major project had been an exploration of the underwater ruins of a Second World War shipwreck in the Mediterranean Sea. That was a poignant journey, a testament to a grim period of human history. But despite the historical significance and the eerie beauty of the coral-clad wreckage, the experience was different, perhaps because it lacked the element of human life that Ravenser Odd held. Once a mighty symbol of naval power, the decaying hull now lay silent and broken in the ocean floor. Ravenser Odd was not merely a relic of an ancient era, but a snapshot of everyday life frozen in time and lost to the ocean depths. It had once been filled with people, their hopes and dreams, their daily routines. This tangible human element made this dive so much more thrilling. I felt like an interloper peering into a time capsule of lives lived centuries ago. I was careful to capture every significant structure, every suggestive detail that hinted at the lives once lived here. I photographed the decay, the rich marine life, and the profound contrast between human architecture and natural adaptations. Each click of my shutter felt like a tribute, a way to immortalize the town and its untold stories for posterity. The underwater world has a curious way of warping one's sense of time. Minutes stretched into hours, and each moment is amplified in the silent stillness of the ocean depths. Before I knew it, our dive time was up, and the team began their gradual ascent back to the surface. As I started to swim upwards, I felt an unaccountable tug, like an unseen current pulling me back towards the sunken town. It was as if Ravenser Odd was reluctant to let us go, whispering silent pleas for us to stay and listen to its muted stories a while longer. Mistaking it for my thirst for excitement was a mistake. A few days later, I found myself in the Sea Pass Society's dedicated photography lab, surrounded by the familiar hum of high-end development equipment and the sharp, comforting scent of photographic chemicals. Developing photos was always a ritual of anticipation and discovery for me. The way an image gradually emerged on the paper felt almost like magic, a portal opening up to a frozen moment in time. As the first of the underwater images began to materialize, I was thrilled to see the haunting beauty of the sunken town coming to life once more. But as I went through the developing photos, unease started to creep in. I first noticed it in one of the shots of the town square. There was a shadow that didn't align with the underwater light refraction, a blur that felt out of place. I thought it might be a technical glitch, perhaps an equipment malfunction or an error in the development process. But as more photos developed, the anomalies kept appearing. Patches of darkness seemed to move across sequential shots, undefined shapes lurking in the corners of the frame, and odd distortions that seemed to warp the scenery. They were subtle and could easily be dismissed as flaws or artifacts of the photographic process, but something about them made me feel uneasy. I reviewed the images over and over, trying to find a logical explanation, but the more I looked, the more the inconsistencies gnawed at me. It felt as though the images were hiding something that lurked just beyond the edges of perception. It was as if the quiet town of Ravenser Odd had secrets it was reluctant to reveal, secrets that I had inadvertently brought back with me to the surface. In some sort of sickening denial, I laid out the images before me. My mind teetered between disbelief and fear. Something was wrong, but I couldn't discern whether it was a simple mistake on my part or something more profound. This was my work, and the anomalies, however bizarre, had emerged from my own camera. I wanted it to be my error. It had to be, right? Doubt seeped into my thoughts, creating a whirlpool of uncertainty. Had I overlooked something in the underwater conditions? Had I mishandled the equipment? Was there something wrong with my camera? I was well respected in my field and known for my precision and attention to detail. A mistake like this felt uncharacteristic, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. And then there was the question of whether to reveal these anomalies to my superiors. I found myself wrestling with the implications. I was not one to be easily intimidated, but the thought of jeopardizing my position unsettled me. Despite my accomplishments, the all too familiar feeling of imposter syndrome set in, and I found myself questioning my abilities and whether I really belonged here. Despite this, deep within me, a quiet resolve began to form. As much as the prospect of uncertainty unnerved me, the idea of not pursuing this anomaly felt even worse. I've always been driven by a hunger for truth and understanding. I had to find out if I messed up. If not, what was causing the distortions? Ravenser Odd had presented me with a puzzle, and I could not resist the pull to delve deeper. I approached Dr. Howard with a carefully considered proposal. I crafted an excuse, one that was rooted in genuine scientific curiosity and made to cover my arse if it turned out to be my fault the entire time. I suggested we needed a more detailed visual record of the site, a series of panoramic images that could be digitally stitched together to provide a 360-degree view of the underwater town. This could enhance our understanding of the spatial layout of the town, Doctor, I argued, maintaining an air of professional concern. Imagine being able to virtually navigate through the streets of Ravenser Odd. It could reveal architectural patterns, structural relationships, aspects that we may have missed during the first dive. I had chosen my words carefully, knowing that the proposal would appeal to Dr. Howard's keen interest in experimental archaeological techniques. The prospect of contributing a unique method of documentation to the field was too enticing for her to disregard. To my relief, she agreed. That sounds like an excellent idea, Oliver, she nodded, a spark of excitement in her eyes. Prepare for another dive, and make sure this time we document every inch of that town. With the go-ahead secured, a new wave of anticipation swept over me. I was going back. I found myself relieved, yet something still sat deep inside of me. In the days leading up to the dive, I found myself spending more time with Callum. Our shared passion for ocean exploration had naturally drawn us together, but our contrasting personalities solidified our bond. With his infectious enthusiasm and easygoing nature, Callum was the perfect counterbalance to my more focused and often intense demeanor. Callum had a knack for putting people at ease. He was full of stories about his adventures from all over the world, from wild encounters with marine creatures to the time he got lost in a coral maze off the coast of Australia. His tales were always told with a broad grin and a glint of mischief in his eyes, leaving anyone within earshot in fits of laughter. One evening, as the sunset bathed the seas in hues of orange and red, Callum and I found ourselves sitting on the company dock just minutes from our temporary accommodations. He had brought 2 hot cocoa mugs, a comforting drink perfect for the cold evening. Callum turned to me as we sipped the sweet beverage and watched the sun sink below the horizon. You know, Ollie, diving isn't just about the adrenaline rush or sense of adventure, he said, his eyes reflecting the dying light of the setting sun. It's about connection. It's about understanding our place in the grand scheme of things and how we, as humans, interact with the world around us. He spoke, his words rich with his accent. His words resonated with me. It was comforting to know that someone else understood and shared this sentiment. It was this shared sense of connection, this shared appreciation of the ocean's magnitude and mystery that had drawn me to the profession in the first place. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly above, I hesitated, weighing my words carefully before speaking. Callum, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. There's something about the last dive I haven't told anyone. Callum turned to look at me, his unusually cheerful expression giving way to concern. What is it, Ollie? The photographs from the dive, there are anomalies, I confessed, watching his face nervously for any sign of ridicule or disbelief. Anomalies, he echoed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. Yeah, I nodded. Shadows that don't make sense, blurs that seem to move. It's as if something was there with us. A silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant lapping of waves against the boat's hull. Callum's face was thoughtful. Momentarily, I feared I had crossed a line. Finally, he broke down the silence. Ollie, we were diving into a sunken town, a place that held life, history, probably secrets too, he began, his tone measured. And let's not forget we were deep underwater, where light behaves strangely and visibility can play tricks on your eyes and the camera. I nodded, knowing his rationale made sense, but also knowing my concerns weren't mere illusions. It's more than that. The photos, they feel wrong. I can't explain it, but it's like the town was trying to tell us something or warn us. Callum regarded me for a long moment, the lines on his face deepening as he processed what I'd shared. Then, with a firm nod, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. Ollie, you're one of the best underwater photographers out there. If you say something was off, then it was off. We'll keep our eyes open on the next dive. Together. His reassurance brought a wave of relief, and I found myself smiling at his words. His support and willingness to believe in my concerns made me feel better about the upcoming dive. There was a moment of silence as Callum finished speaking. "Thank you, Callum," I finally said, my voice filled with gratitude. "I know it sounds odd, I just needed someone to know. Just in case." "In case of what?" he asked, his eyes searching mine for answers. I paused for a moment, staring out at the endless expanse of the sea. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But whatever it is, I have a feeling it's tied to Ravenser Odd. This is different from my other dives. It feels like something more than just a sunken town." Callum continued to look at me, his eyes reflecting concern and curiosity. It was clear that part of him didn't believe me, but he remained silent. "Well," he said after a considerable pause, "we'll face it. As you said, this is about more than just the town, whatever it is." I nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie in his words. "Yeah," I agreed, taking a deep breath as I turned to face the sea again. The following morning dawned bright and clear, the crisp blue sky starkly contrasting the enigma that awaited us beneath the surface. As we prepared for the dive, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and unease. There was a silent tension in the air, like the stillness before a storm. Callum, once again, meticulously checked over our equipment, his attention to detail a welcome source of comfort amidst my apprehension. Every buckle, valve, and gauge was inspected. Every aspect of our gear was scrutinized to ensure maximum safety. As we began our descent, the familiar coolness of the water enveloped us, and my senses heightened. This time, however, the thrill of the dive was tinged with an undercurrent of uncertainty. As the town of Ravenser Odd came into view, an odd sensation settled over me. It was as though the town was somehow aware of our presence. There was a whisper at the edge of my consciousness, a sense of being observed from the shadows. The closer we got, the more palpable this feeling became. It felt like we were intruders in this lost town, disturbing the peace of its long-forgotten inhabitants. As we began our exploration, I continued to notice fleeting shadows at the edge of my vision. Faint movements caught in the corner of my eyes seemingly disappeared as soon as I turned to look. My heart pounded in my chest as a chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to stay composed and focused on the task. Determined to fulfill my promise to Dr. Howard, I set about capturing the panoramic images of Ravenser Odd. I methodically swam from one building to the next, with Callum following closely behind. I captured every detail in the sunken town. The remains of the harbor, the ancient seawall, and the collapsed roofs of the houses were all immortalized in my camera. Yet, with each shutter click, the sense of unease grew. It was as though the very act of photographing the town was disrupting something. And with each disruption, the uncanny sensation that we were not alone intensified. It felt like the sea had a heartbeat, a thrumming rhythm that pulsed around me, seeping into my bones. The feeling of being watched became stronger as we swam through the main square, where a towering statue, ravaged by time and water, stood as a testament to the town's lost glory. As my flash illuminated the worn stone, I could swear the statue's gaze was locked onto us, the cold eyes of stone holding a cold glare. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as a trick of the light, but Callum had noticed it too. The murkiness of the water seemed to thicken around us as we continued to the outskirts of the town, the once vibrant coral that adorned the buildings appearing pallid and ghostly under our torchlight. Occasionally, a fish would dart away, its silvery scales shimmering briefly before disappearing into the blue abyss, leaving us in solitude once more. Examining the town more, I noticed each structure held its own tale of decay. Houses, once filled with the hum of life, now stood desolate, their skeletal remains encrusted with marine life. The town's church, with its toppled spire, lay half buried under the sand. I captured the eerie beauty of the forsaken town etched in each frame. As we neared the end of our exploration, the sensation of being watched peaked. The water around us seemed to ripple with an unseen presence. Suddenly, a gust of underwater current swept past us, an inexplicable chill that froze my blood. A dark form darted in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing but the ancient ruins and the haunting darkness beyond. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched Callum signal our ascent, his eyes wide with fear. A dark shadow darted towards him from the corner of my eye. A surge of adrenaline rushed through me as I turned to look, but it was too late. The unseen force struck Callum, pushing him with a violent current into the decrepit walls of a nearby building below. His regulator was knocked free, bubbles bursting from his mouth in a panicked rush, yet his training prevented him from breathing in water. "Callum!" I screamed into my regulator, my voice muffled and carried away by the water. Frantically, I swam towards him, my heart pounding in my chest. His eyes were wide in shock, and his hands desperately grappled for the regulator as he struggled against the new, unusual current. I grabbed him, anchoring myself and fighting the force battering us. I swam down and, holding onto Callum with one hand, I grabbed his backup regulator and shoved it towards him. He took it, jamming it into his mouth. He purged the water out of the piece, and his panicked eyes softened slightly as a life-giving air flowed once more. I turned to face the town, a sense of anger burning inside me. Whatever was lurking in the forgotten depths of Ravenser had shown itself not just as an uncanny presence, but as a threatening force. The water seemed to pulsate with sinister energy. The town's ruins casting ominous shadows in our torchlight. I could feel it watching us, pressing against us, making its displeasure known. I signaled an assent to Callum, who nodded, his eyes wide but resolute. We kicked upwards, each stroke taking us farther from the menacing depths of Ravenser. As we rose, the water grew lighter, the pressure eased, and the sense of dread began to dissipate. Just as we thought we were clear, a sudden force pulled us back down, even stronger than before. It was as if the entire ocean had become an invisible hand dragging us back towards the malevolent town. I screamed into my regulator again, and I saw him get pulled away from me, his form disappearing into the murkiness. Desperate, I tried to swim towards him, but the force was too strong. Then, suddenly, my grip on my camera slipped, and it began to sink, its attached lights flickering like a falling star into the watery void. I watched horror-stricken as it fell into a crack and deeper into the abyss. I cried out, my voice lost in the aquatic emptiness. That camera was my lifeline, not just for my profession, but now it seemed for our survival. It sank rapidly, swallowed up by the eternal darkness of the ocean. Whatever was targeting us was weak, as if it needed to be closer to the town to fully overpower us. As I was about to dive after it, I felt a hand grip my arm. I turned to see Callum, his eyes wide with fear and confusion, but alive. He shook his head. He was right. Going after it spelt more danger than either of us could imagine. We ascended again with nothing else to do, hoping the loss of our evidence calmed the town. The effort was physically taxing, the cold seawater churning around us as we battled to ascend. Each kick and each push felt like we were fighting against a relentless tide. My muscles screamed in protest, but I forced myself to keep going, pushing past the pain and exhaustion. Callum was ahead of me, every sinew of his body straining as he too fought against the pull. Determination was etched on his face, yet he kept his eye on me. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to gain distance, the pull of the town lessening. I could see the lighter waters above us, the sun's rays penetrating the deep blue, beckoning us towards safety. We broke to the surface and found ourselves clinging to the side of the boat, our breaths ragged and our bodies exhausted. Our crew helped our heavy bodies aboard, their faces masks of concern and confusion. We exchanged no words. The terror of our experience had left us momentarily speechless. As we docked back at the mainland, Dr. Howard was there to meet us. She looked troubled, eyes scanning Callum and me, noting our bruised and battered bodies. We were a far cry from the enthusiastic team that had embarked on a journey to chronicle the sunken town. Oliver, Callum, she began, her voice a mixture of concern and something else, something I couldn't quite place. What happened out there? I exchanged a glance with Callum before turning back to her. Taking a deep breath, I recounted the inexplicable experiences, the unseen force, the threatening shadows, and the attack. Dr. Howard listened, her face paling as we described our encounter. As I mentioned the loss of the camera, I saw a flicker of disappointment cross her face, but it was quickly replaced by a serious expression as I continued. I know this may sound impossible, I concluded, bracing myself for her reaction, but something is down there, Dr. Howard, something that doesn't want us there. For a moment there was silence. Dr. Howard seemed to be processing what we told her, her gaze distant. Then, to my surprise, she nodded. I believe you, Oliver, she said quietly. In fact, I owe you both an apology. She took a deep breath and then began to explain. Teams before us had reported the same strange feelings, the same sense of being watched, but it was more than that. After the third dive, members started returning with inexplicable injuries. Those who were brave enough to attempt the fourth dive, they never returned at all. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that capturing photographic evidence would help us understand what was happening, Dr. Howard confessed, her voice wavering slightly. I didn't want to believe that the town itself could be dangerous. While we were gone, Dr. Howard admitted that she had examined the photos from our first dive. She also admitted to noticing the same strange phenomena I had. Ghostly figures, inexplicable shadows, things that didn't make sense, but she dismissed them, attributing them to lighting or damage to the camera. But now, upon hearing your account, I understand that there's something more at play here, she admitted, her eyes reflecting a deep remorse. I should have warned you. I should have stopped the dives, but my desire for discovery overrode my caution. Her confession left us shocked. The realization that she had known at least partially of the potential danger but had not shared it, it stung. Yet, looking at her, seeing her genuine remorse, I could only feel a deep sense of sadness. I shook it all away. As Dr. Howard's confession hung in the air, a deep sense of betrayal began to coil in the pit of my stomach. Anger, hot and quick, started to rise within me, searing away the icy dread that had gripped me since the dive. I stared at Dr. Howard, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief. My chest tightened and my heart pounded in my ears. The woman who had entrusted us with an assignment of a lifetime, the woman we respected and admired, had knowingly led us into a trap. A trap that could have cost us our lives. We had trusted her, relied on her, and she had betrayed us. The pressure built inside me, a physical weight pressing against my chest, the corners of my vision growing red with rage. The sting of betrayal cut deep. A flash of memory. The cold, unforgiving waters, the threatening shadows in the deep. Callum's terrified eyes, the invisible force that had almost claimed us, all came crashing down, feeding the fire of my anger. You knew. My voice was low and harsh, carrying the weight of my brewing anger. You knew, and you still sent us down there. Dr. Howard tried to respond, her voice placating, but the words were lost on me. The anger was all-consuming now, blotting out any reason. We could have died, Howard. Callum could have died. The words tore from my throat, raw and furious. At that moment, I felt a sudden urge to leave, to put as much distance between myself and Dr. Howard as possible, to escape from the bitter taste of betrayal, but instead I stood there, my fists clenched, my body trembling with unspent rage. My career, my love for the ocean, and the trust I had in those I worked with all felt like they were sinking. A shiver ran through me, a mix of anger and something else, a deep, echoing sadness as profound as the ocean itself. I walked out after that. In a rush of adrenaline, I packed away my belongings, leaving behind the new equipment tainted by the darkness of the project, and left. I hope whatever inhabits that town stays there.